So what advice would you give if it is one of your siblings who has harmed another sibling?
That's a tough one, hey?
It's really difficult.
Because I think that within families, and it's not uncommon, because if we're thinking about, some of the things we talked about around access and around relationship and around all those sorts of things, sometimes those relationships can be, have all of those factors there. I suppose the biggest thing is that everybody gets support. And you most of all, to be able to just have people sit alongside you to go, this is really tough, and how do we make sure the one who did the harm is safe, and is getting the resourcing and the intervention that they need, but that the person who has been harmed is also given space and time. Because one of the challenges, which I think we might have talked about in other contexts, is that there can be this desire to go, okay, let's move on from it. We're all good, we've acknowledged it, let's get the family back together, or let's, smooth the way. And if the person who's been harmed picks up on that message and says, oh, okay, yep, no, I'm all good now, they really haven't been given that space and time to really work out what they think and feel about this stuff. So, certainly Start's position wouldn't be about additional punishment for the person who's done the harm, because actually they need support, they need understanding, and there's really good interventions, which I think you've had Stop come and talk on the listening to families. So I think there's some really good ways to support safe behaviour. But I think that we have a stance that while young people are engaging, those who've experienced harm are engaging in therapy, that there needs to actually be no contact with the person that's hurt them. And that's about just saying, how do we slow it down? How do we create space? How do we get the adults taking responsibility for this, so that the young person who's been harmed just gets a chance to work out how they feel? Because there's a difference between physical safety, they may not do that again, and emotional safety, which is they may not be harming me in that way, but actually this is still someone who has harmed me, and how do I learn to trust that I'm safe?
Yeah, and I think this can be a really big challenge for parents when we're actually stipulating that no contact rule while the young person's engaged in therapy, certainly at the in the first part of therapy, and for as long as that might take for them to be able to feel safe again in the presence of the person that harmed them. But that is what we're asking is perhaps the sibling that did the harm to be going in and staying at grandma's or grandpa's for a while, to provide that time and space. But it can be really difficult.
And certainly ACC, who are the main funders of support, don't have that criteria. Other clinicians might not have that same criteria. So if you are in that situation where it is a sibling situation or a close family situation, we would absolutely recommend that it's not just your eyes on this. Families can kind of go, oh, let's keep it in-house. There's so much shame. And I get that. But this is about long-term well-being and long-term healthy relationships. And so if it's kind of driven under the carpet, then, you might have short-term peace, but actually there's harm, and potentially some quite significant harm brewing. And so, to be brave enough to tell, and so that people get to have a look at, well, why what happened. And there are agencies like Stop and Start, which again might in the short term feel really difficult and exposing, and here's our family being laid bare, but hopefully the experience would be that it's done with respect and care, so that in the shortest time you get to come back together and be safe. And I think that if you are in those situations, to come along and have a consult, to talk through those options, to find out what steps are ahead of you. Certainly there are other ACC providers who, as I said before, may not have that same criteria, so you can still get help. But yeah, our stance would be, Yeah, safety has to be really key, and even if it's really uncomfortable and awkward and exposing, you've got a bigger game here.
And this is just as an aside too, but just on the topic of siblings, I'm thinking about where a sibling has been harmed, and you're the non-abusing sibling, but you get caught up in this situation where your sibling has been harmed, perhaps by someone in the family, perhaps by an adult, or perhaps by someone outside of the family, and there's been some really interesting, very recent research come out about how siblings of those other children in the family who have been harmed can be impacted really significantly when this situation happens in a family, and they can in fact feel their own significant anger, sadness, confusion, and depending on how it rolls in the family and how openly it's talked about or not, they can also be left feeling isolated and kind of a sense that it's something they're not able to talk about, or it kind of gets shut down. And so it's really interesting to think about. Certainly I think at start we really try to have a whole whānau approach, and with the ACC model of care, I think we've talked about this, that ACC does provide funded sessions for whānau, and if we're thinking about the whole of the family, then I don't see any reason why siblings can't be involved in some way, shape or form in that work too, because we're talking about another child who's hasn't been harmed themselves, but is part of what might be the fallout, especially if it's another adult it's an adult in the family who's done the harm, and then that person is removed from the family. So I think it's interesting to think about and not forget about non-abusing siblings.
Yeah, sure.